Lesley, welcome to Bylines Scotland Radio. I'm chuffed you've come on because I've been listening to your podcast and covering your films watching your films for years. So thank you very much for taking your time for us today.
No bother. I mean, it's always great to sort of. There's a funny old community of us all sprinkled around who think and talk and try and do stuff, and we may never meet. I mean, what the heck are you doing down the road still? But anyway,
Well,
so but nonetheless, this connects us all, which is great.
we're going to publish this podcast on Sunday, International Women's Day, and I thought I'd start off maybe just talking to you about the women that influenced you early doors and then maybe later in your career? Because your mum was from Wick and your dad was from Banffshire. But the interesting thing for me, before we get any further, is you were born in Wolverhampton. How does a woman from Wick and a man from Banffshire end up in Wolverhampton?
Well, Dad came from a road junction in Banffshire, which kind of like that was a hell of a holiday for 2 weeks every year coming over from Belfast, and they both met in Wick because Dad wanted to be a poet, was a poet, and then went to the Second World War, was a RAF pilot. It changed him completely. So as it did many men, I'm sure. And he kind of came back and had all that idealism sort of slightly knocked out of him. So he just knuckled down and basically joined the job that his own father had. He had been a farmer, had a heart condition, started to work for the Eagle Star Insurance Company. Dad went into the same company. He got moved to Wick. Lo and behold, and so the next job he got posting was Wolverhampton, and the next posting after that was Belfast. Hence the accent.
Oh, right. Uh, what kind of woman was your mum then?
Well, she was, I sort of think she was nothing like me. She was a small woman. Um, Sort of, I'm kind of almost 6 foot. I did wonder for a while if I was adopted or something, but it was a very tall family on both sides. I mean, she had very sort of, she was quieter, much quieter. She was quietest one of the family. Actually, she was left-handed, and in those days, I mean, it's a terrible thing to say, but her own mother was ashamed of her being left-handed, tried to get her to sort of use her right hand, made her work in jobs where people wouldn't see her writing because she was using her left hand. All of that really affected her confidence an awful lot.
Right.
So she wasn't the kind of, maybe brash, outgoing person that people might think I am. But in a way, maybe that did affect me quite a lot because, she had that. I understand what it is to be sort of have your confidence knocked pretty early doors. Because she would keep being baffled at how my brother and I managed to do reasonably well academically when she was so stupid. It
Yeah,
would break your heart.
it's
So
interesting.
anyway, she was a great committed. I mean, she was very sort of well, she wasn't the least politically committed overtly, but she was a complete blooming machine when it came to land reform, and that's the paradox of people from Caithness. At least my family, I would say they were all kind of back in the day a bit right wing actually. I mean, there's a picture of my aunt with Margaret Thatcher, one of her prized possessions. So that was a tricky relationship for a while. Um, but that same aunt would never consciously be at an event at which the Countess of Sutherland was even present.
Um,
So that's what you get from growing, having people who grew up in that environment. They just will not let the kind of, the clearances are not dead for anybody for whose
mhm.
families were cleared, and ours were.
You went to University at Oxford, and you were the first, which I loved, the first non-Tory president of Oxford, which I think is magnificent. Uh, were you always, because you're a campaigner, you've campaigned all your life. Were you a good student? Did you realise the benefits of education?
No, uh, no, not really. I was always a bit of a kind of. I mean, there was too much interesting also happening. That time was the late '70s, so it was the advent of Thatcher, the Falkland War, the miners' strike towards the end of it. I
Mm.
mean, there's just seminal stuff happening. Anti-apartheid, everything was happening. So I was just ticking over on the degree, and in Oxford. the system was that you had tutorials. So there was only two people in a tutorial, and actually there was an odd number in the course, so there was one, and I was the one. So basically, I'm convinced that really helped the old gift of the gab, because I had to hand in essays, or rather, I had to read essays every week. If you had two people, one handed in, one spoke. So I just spoke. So I used to, I'm ashamed to say, really, I just went to a library, photocopied something, and just ad-libbed.
Well,
Sight reading ad-libbed. So,
that's why
there
you're
were
so good in
bits.
front of a screen as well. Then you can
It
actually,
don't, no, it's not a screen. It's like you're live in a room with somebody,
yeah.
and you're basically ad-libbing and busking it. And I was getting so blasé that I didn't allow any time to even read the thing through before I went in. I mean, there's a bit of an adrenaline high doing that, but by the time you're about to do your finals, you look at this file full of photocopied crap and realize you've got an entire degree that you have to do in 6 weeks flat. So yeah, I wasn't a very good student at all.
What kind of women influenced you at university and into your first occupation and in broadcasting and things? Was there women there that kind of showed you the way, especially with the kind of broadcasting side of things, Lesley?
No, not at all.
I'm doing well here with these questions, aren't I?
No, no, but they're good questions. They're just not
Aye.
perhaps the anticipated answer. I mean, my mother had given me a little book of sort of famous women from history, which I did love and read cover to cover over and over and over and over again. But I was also an incredible tomboy. I mean, apropos of the aforementioned nearly 6 foot, I mean, I've been tall since I was small, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
So I was playing football outdoors the whole time, for the period before boys grew up. Lots of girls were playing football and were basically, in advance and all of that stuff. So, in a funny kind of way, I think you get a lot of confidence, physical confidence from doing things. And I've always been a bit like that, very practically oriented. So, I think confidence comes as much from being physically able to do
Yeah.
stuff. And if I saw boys doing stuff, I never thought, well, that's boys. I wonder what girls do. I just thought, I think I could go faster than him. So that was a bit of a propulsion. At university, I set up a feminist magazine called Lilith, which was a precursor for Harpies and Quines,
Yeah.
which I set up with others later in Scotland. But Lilith was the first attempt in Oxford. So, I mean, working with lots of women there was brilliant, because just let you, you weren't having to you explain yourself all the time to other people. There was a real kind of common sense of let's get on with it. But this was a point where there was lots of women's consciousness raising groups. I mean, I can remember going to about two or three a week. But I also went to a nonviolent direct action simulation class every week.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
because we were occupying the hell out of everything over everything. And you needed to kind of get your skills up so that you were assertive but not aggressive. So it was an incredible time to be at university,
What's
because
the
there
way
was
to
this,
say?
this sort of stuff.
The sort of kind of the thrust of feminism coming through, like that must have been a really exciting time to be a woman in amongst this kind of male-dominated world.
Well, yes, except you got pelters, total pelters.
Right.
I mean, in that I was the first woman, and also the first non-Tory president of the student union, I hasten to add, that the debating union being quite another,
Yeah, yeah.
in the opinion of student activists, sort of louche kind of thing that the
Yes.
lefties kind of boycotted mostly. But anyway, the Tories having lost that position, as it were, because they, generally speaking, won Oxford and weirdly won Liverpool and Inner Temple, as I recall. You could see Inner Temple because that's the kind of court training ground. Liverpool and Oxford. So having lost Oxford, they were furious, and their dads were all lawyers. So I spent the entire year as president of that student union, fielding interdicts, legal challenges on the most trivial things. I mean, if I was 8 hours late giving 1 week's notice for an election to a university body, I got an interdict. And it was it was actually really stressful, which was the intention. I met a couple of the Tories, and they sort of, said, "Oh, how are you getting on?" And said, "You'll have a nervous breakdown before this year's over. That's the plan." And I said, "Well, just you try." But
Bring
I
it
did
on.
go grey. I went grey that year. I mean,
Right.
it was hugely stressful. And at the end of that, I thought, I'm never getting involved in party politics. This
Mm.
is crap, childish, venal, ego-ridden bullshit. And yeah,
Uh,
so it was rather formative.
when did you get the whiff of that's a great word, a whiff of broadcasting? When did you get the notion of broadcasting? And I was thinking as well today, Leslie, you were probably got into broadcasting when it was still kind of male in the newsroom, a male dominated thing. Would that be true?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was on a BBC training course in 1983 or something. And at that point, there were no female foreign correspondents because there couldn't be, because the rule was that you had to be married to be a foreign correspondent. And
Right.
so that would mean that anyone who wanted to be a foreign correspondent had to have a guy in tow who was also willing to be hoiked all over Europe, let's say, and moved every 3 years. And that there was nobody that fitted that bill. People will think, but what about Kate Adie? I mean, if you notice carefully, she was always called a special correspondent,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That's what it was like. So I was, minding my own business, kind of involved with the politics at university, and then did final year, and then thought, oh my God, reality beckons. Um, and I'd kind of always been very hostile to journalism, I've got to say,
Huh?
because I was on the receiving end of so much bile.
Yeah.
There was one particular student paper that had a picture of myself and the head of NUS, the National Union of Students that year, who was also a woman, with the headline, "Could you rape these women? The unacceptable faces of feminism."
Wow.
And that created a massive stooshy in the university, but the editor of that paper kept sending me updates every week on how many papers they had sold as a result of the, controversy. So, so this is kind of what it was like.
Uh,
Anyway, I thought if that's journalism, you can kind of keep it. But then I did realize I quite like the business of communication. So the year I graduated, I went to Radio Oxford, said, "Give us a job," and they said, "You can't have one, but you can just walk, or you can shadow people." So I spent the summer doing that, and I thought, this is the business, radio. So that's what started it.
That's exactly the same as me. That's how I got into radio as well. I came out of the RAF and I just had a wander around BBC Radio Cambridgeshire. And that's where I started mine. And it was more or less the same thing. And it was just, a lot of people in local radio were accidentals, broadcasters that went in and just went, I quite like this, which I do love. And you made a really formidable sort of career out of broadcasting. Uh, was the decision to leave kind of mainstream broadcasting, was that yours? Did you want to stay? Because the BBC went through a lot of changes, didn't it?
Well, it's strange. Perhaps as yourself, I wasn't really aware of creating a career of any kind, formidable or otherwise. You just do what's in front of you, and then you look around and 40 years have happened, and
Yeah.
that's what you call a career then, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So,
Yeah.
um, but no, when did I leave? Sort of in 2004 or five. I'll tell you what happened, actually. I mean, I was doing a program. I think it was called the Lesley Riddoch program, right enough, at lunchtime, 12 till 2. And it was doing pretty well, actually. I mean, it won two Sony Speech Awards and whatever. And at the end of 5 years, they organised a swally to sort of celebrate 5 years. And it's strange to these things because I hadn't really clocked that it was 5 years. You don't particularly.
No.
And so we were at the swally, and I sort of thought, wow, can I imagine doing this for another 5 years? And it's funny because if they hadn't organised that swally, I might be there yet.
Yeah.
But I sort of thought, I don't think I can actually, because there was already a lot of tensions within the team. The Beeb just wanted the kind of program that just had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people just saying a couple of words off, a couple of words off, as phone-ins. They were moving towards this thing of not having guests that basically knew anything, because that was cheaper. And so there was a lot of arguments happening the whole time from my point of view about what we were doing. So Yeah, I just looked at all of it and thought, I think actually, it's time to just leave this. So it was a difficult one because, everything seemed to be going fine,
Yeah.
but it's often like
Oh yeah.
that. You want to get out before, particularly what I was noticing was, especially with reference to where Kay Adams is at the moment, is that you start because there's such a gap between your knowledge and your levels of, how you'll deal with people, and then the producers and researchers who are much younger and less experienced. And the problem in lots of walks of life, I'd guess, is that you have some sort of mouthy, experienced folk kind of at the center of it, and then younger, less experienced people feeding in information, which very often isn't anything you need because you kind of knew that. I can remember getting a briefing note once on land reform, including three articles I'd written and sort of trying to point this out and saying, do you know at the beginning I did say that I kind of knew quite a lot about this, and actually the only things I really needed is that, that, and that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was tending to happen was instead of filling the kind of gaps in my knowledge, and after all, I'm the one on the front line, people were doing sort of briefing notes exercises for themselves, which in a way, it's all an education. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? But it's still, if you don't just get the three things you asked for at the beginning, it can be quite frustrating. So I can remember thinking, if you get into the stage where it feels like there's everybody who's in this team has got one outlook, one way of doing things, one idea of what's good enough, and then there's you. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
who's the odd one out? And it was me. So I just thought this is going to get fractious, so it's just better to go.
Let's move on to your interest in all things Nordic. When did that happen? Because you've done so many films about the ways of life of the Nordic countries. When did you get into that?
Uh, well, my dad died in 1985 of a massive heart attack. I say that only because it was pretty awful. I was just 25 at the time. And it left my mum sort of a bit bereft. So my brother and I used to take her, everywhere that dad might have taken her to, keep her going on holidays and stuff. And one place she really wanted to go was Norway because, she's the one that's from Caithness. Her surname is Moore. The Moors are a big, well,
Yeah.
Moor means big in practically every Nordic language. And indeed, her father was Magnus Moore, which means big, big, So I had a cousin, grandfather, uncle, all called Magnus. I thought everybody did. So mum wanted us to go to Møre and Romsdal, which is a county in Norway, where she hoped to find hundreds of moors. And it's a bit like Caithness and Sutherland. You meet an awful lot of folk with Sutherland as a surname. You didn't meet many Caithnesses.
No.
We went to Allisond in Møre and Romsdal in probably 1987, got the phone book out, discovered there were no moors whatsoever, but had a really brilliant time looking round. And it just began to make me open my eyes to this place is like us, but then not like us in all sorts of how it operates ways. And I think after that, that was the bug. And then after that, I've just kept going.
From your films itself, there is. Well, I looked. I just. I think I watched the one. Was it with Denmark? But I just watched that and I thought I felt connected to it. It felt like a good way of life. Is that what you want for Scotland? Because I mean, we'll talk about independence and politics in a second. But could you see that and say we could have this in Scotland, or parts of Scotland might even have it already?
Yeah, totally. But I mean, each sort of film I do. I mean, I've been to all the Nordic countries a lot before this anyway, because I set up this group, Nordic Horizons, with
Yeah.
a Labour supporter, Dan Wynne, actually back 15 years ago. So, and I've been visiting them off and on for any reason since. But anyway, the films, each time I go to a country, I think, no, this is the one that's really like Scotland. It could be Norway, first of all, because, I mean, we share a North Sea fishing oil, but, and yet we don't share at all their approach to local power because the Norwegians are absolutely local. and that's the strength of them. Their hydro system, which is the energy they use, is owned and was set up by local municipalities. It's not a centrally state-owned thing. So, unfortunately, that is probably one of the absolute secrets, which is not a secret, actually, of the Nordic success. And we can't emulate it because we can't even accept how centralized we are. So, then you move around and you see different countries. You're like, no, Finland's most like the Scots because, they had real problems with their health record a while back. But they took 40 years to plan their way out of it. And then you think, 40 years and 20 changes of government. I wonder what we could do over that period consistently. And the answer is not a lot.
Mm.
So there's things that you can see that are kind of similar, and then things that are kind of really out of our grasp. Because, like, I'm sorry to say, that for politicians who've grown up in a British environment, I'm afraid they don't realise how British they are. By which I mean, they have outlooks that are shaped necessarily and inevitably by the only thing they've ever known,
Yeah.
which is this semi-privatized, archaic, sort of not functioning state which mistrusts people power with every fibre of its being. And Scotland is only a bit better.
Let's talk about politics now. Holyrood, May the 7th, we've got the Holyrood elections, and all the pundits are saying that it's not chaos, but it's so volatile. Voting patterns. We had Gorton and Denton there with the Greens doing ever so well, and I spoke to the Green Party not so long ago, and they're quite confident and buoyant. How do you see the political perspective now in Scotland? And do you think, Lesley, independence, it should be further up the agenda?
Well, yes, it's a difficult one because, I mean, I'm sure the SNP will say, you hear the SNP talking about independence and John Swinney a lot, a lot more than in previous elections and with previous leaders. If you look then at what preparations there are for it, it doesn't look like it's, however, a kind of bit of a going concern. So that is demotivating a lot of people. It feels a bit like 2024, Labour won a sort of loveless election. They won everywhere. It was thin as well.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who it was said, this is looking like it could be the same for the SNP. They will win, very likely. They'll be the largest party. And you sort of think to yourself, well, what's the problem then? I mean, that's what electoral politics are about. Parties are electoral machines. They're not there to sort of teach the world to sing or have tremendous ideas, actually. And so if they do well, there's even a chance they might hit that 65, which gives them an absolute majority, which was John Swinney's idea that's the condition for being game back on for a referendum, at least in their dealings with whoever's the government. It just feels kind of everywhere I've been around the place with the Finland film that's doing the rounds, people are pitching up, which shows that, they're all still ready for what kind of country could this be. But there's just a sense of, the kind of big hopes and expectations, all the energy got used up in that last decade after the Indie Ref. So people are kind of quietly hopeful, but just can't see the route to the top anymore. And that's going to have to come. I'd imagine, there's a lot of thought now about actually 2029, which now you think, God damn it. Every time you get to one election, it's the next one that's going to be really pivotal and so on. But it's true that whilst everybody has been speculating wildly about the likely success of reform, since Labour seems to be falling to pieces, they aren't looking at the other side. The left is back, with the Greens. And there is the chance that if you put all the left together, and I mean, you're having to go some to call the Labour Party and the Lib Dems left, but they're not reform, let's say, you could have a kind of rainbow government in there. You could. It's very unlikely, not just numbers wise, but these guys are not used to working with one another. And it would seem like the end of time for Labour to have to admit that they need to have others in the fold. And there's huge contradictions in there. It would be a very hard thing to put together. But what would be the alternative, given the government to reform and the Conservatives? Do you think anyone would ever forgive Labour or the SNP for, if you like, being huffy enough that they couldn't get over themselves? And if something like that was to happen, and the predictions are 48, 49 seats for the SNP, which is not to be sniffed at, I wonder what they would be asking for in return.
Yeah.
So, there may be a route through that nobody anticipates. Fact ends. But you have to be ready. The point is, you
Well,
have to
yeah,
be ready.
that's what I was going to say as well. I've been talking to people about well-being economies, and even Scottonomics talking about our own money and everything. But I think that there's a sort of innate sense for Scotland for people, Scottish people, to look after each other. We have that in us. I don't think we're unique, but have that in it. But before we get run out of time, I've just come away from the news, and I've seen some, places are getting bombed. Akrotiri had a drone. What's your feeling now, especially as you just hit on reform there, and they seem to be getting some kind of traction? Do you think now more than ever, Lesley, that we are influenced by foreign politics in this country? We see what Trump's doing and the right wing's doing, and in mainland Europe as well. Do you think that we are under some kind of influence from the other right wing parties around the world?
Well, clearly, but I think that can be a wee bit overwrought, actually, because I mean, I think reform is gathering momentum from a lot of, well, obviously there's a bit of copycat stuff going on with Donald Trump, and with Donald Trump's might is right kind of approach
Yeah.
to everything. Anyone who feels like that will just think, yeah, let's have that kind of party here. So for sure. But there's lots of domestic stuff that really is working in reform's favour as well. And you look at the Greens, that Green success, somebody, going up the down escalator there managed to sort of contradict all the mainstream views and is doing it today, saying that actually all the raids that have happened on Iran were because there was going to be agreement reached in the talks. And that's why the bombs fell. Now that's an unpopular view as far as the mainstream's concerned. It might be wrong, but at long last, somebody's able to give that view in public because the Greens have got a bit of traction. The SNP had some of that same sort of credibility, particularly when Hamza Yusuf was leader, because his views on Gaza were
Yeah.
basically heard around the world. So we need to get back to that sort of position because there's a complete vacuum, really, on a sort of left of centre perspective on what's happening at the moment.
You've given me a wee bit of hope there, Lesley. You've given me you wagged my tail a wee bit, so thank you very much for that. We better make a plug as well for Finland, the happiest country that almost didn't exist, which you're kind of touring with at the moment as well. If you go to Lesley's website, lesleyriddoch.com, is that the one, Lesley?
Yep,
If
that's
you
it.
if you go there, you can find out where she's going to be. What kind of reception is the film been getting? Because you do Q&A as well.
Yes, there's only me and Q&A. I mean, it's a right old whomp around the place, but it's been fantastic. I mean, I'm just astonished that people still pitch up, and I mean, for all the domestic and big events of the day, nobody asks a question about that because they get so sucked so completely into trying to see what the parallels or the differences are and what's in front of them. And despite how much you're showing people countries that work 100% better than ours, really, because their systems are right. The one thing that just is staring you in the face is that there is no group of people in any of the Nordic countries spending their Sunday afternoons watching a film about another country. The Scots are incredible for being able to take in what might be working better for them and genuinely to be interested in how it all works. So and I'm the only one who sees it, so I'm the only one who goes everywhere and goes, my God, there's another full room here,
Yeah.
what are they like? So it's tremendous and, long may it last because it's got no publicity through any mainstream source whatsoever. This is just word of mouth, yesers, curiosity, fine. And it'll go onto YouTube afterwards, I should say, for anyone who can't make the actual screenings. But the cinemas are a wee bit, they don't like to have a cinema screening when they think folk could just watch it at home on YouTube. I
Mm,
mean, what I'm finding is people want to gather. They really
yes,
want to gather.
the shared
So
experience.
it wouldn't make any difference, to be honest. But it'll go online in April after the McRoberts Centre in Stirling, which is the last cinema.
Lesley, carry on doing what you're doing. I suppose you're going to carry on doing it, and campaigning and shaking the trees a bit more.
Yes, except, I mean, we're all getting on. I mean, I qualified for my pension last week, which was
Bless you.
sort of, yeah, a bit of a livener, and I thought, wow, that podcast, I've been doing it for 19 years now, every week for 19 years.
Great.
So I'm not really doing this for a sort of longevity award or anything. And, there are stages where, particularly with politicians, the stuff that I'm doing is making no traction whatsoever within the SNP.
Mm.
And it does make you feel you might as well not exist. And it really, there's like parallel stuff going on where people are very interested and keen on this sort of decentralized agenda. And then none of it translates into formal politics. So I've got to say, it does make me think there is a time when you just got to hand on the baton, but it's not going to be tomorrow.
Good. That's great to hear. Lesley, thank you very much for coming on Bylines Scotland, and we'll look forward to some more of your films and whatever else you get up to. And enjoy your pension, by the way. I've got my pension. It's very nice. It's a wee poke. You just get you think, oh, that's very nice. I'll take some of that, please.
Well, you do think. I mean, I have worked my entire life, actually. It's
Yes.
just you never expect anything back. And then suddenly something comes back the way and you think, by God, that's tremendous.
Yeah.
I should say the thing I'm working on at the moment is in Scotland. It's a film about the clearances
Oh,
in Strathnaver, which is right up north. And the tenacity of people that were cleared out of Strathnaver that are now trying to make a bit of a statement about their own land up in the very northwest of Sutherland. So that should be out in a couple of months.
Lesley, thank you very much.
Thank you.